Welcome to the channel. We are talking about Gyruda, Doom of Depths. This is a cEDH deck or a cEDH adjacent deck. Perhaps a low tier cEDH deck, but what I will say is this particular deck in this current configuration has won quite a few cEDH pods. I think it catches opponents off guard and some opponents are like, I don't even know what that does. Now, what does Gyruda do? So Gyruda is a legendary creature, Demon Kraken. It is also a companion, but this is just the commander. There's no companion in this deck. But when Gyruda enters the battlefield, each player mills 4 cards. I put a creature card with an even mana value from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. Like I mentioned, this deck catches people off guard, and I would even put this in the category of a turbo deck. I can get Gyruda out turn 1, turn 2 very consistently. Turn 3 is probably average, if not a little bit on the slow side for this deck actually. I run a lot of ramp, including the fast mana. I run a lot of the rituals, but let's get to that in a second. If you would, drop a like and subscribe for more Gyruda deck techs and other cEDH deck techs. In front of me is a ROG side deck that is really funny because I'm looking at that tier 1 deck as I'm also looking at this Gyruda deck, which is like, I don't know, tier 3, tier 4, but that doesn't matter because it gets wins and it's really fun and that's what matters. So here is how I win. It's of course a Dimir deck, so I run Thassa's Oracle. But here is the fun part. I don't run Tainted Pact or Demonic Consultation. I win with Thassa's Oracle in a slightly more fair way. I don't know if you'd call it fair, but I am trying to mill people out, mill my opponents out, and that's probably my first plan, my A plan is just mill everybody out. And you might be thinking, well, Gyruda, it's kind of a universal effect, right? I'm milling my opponents out, I'm also milling myself out because I'm trying to get clones onto the battlefield to copy Gyruda, and the end goal is to have my opponents with no cards in their decks. And I run a sneaky little card called Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. So as my opponents are milling, I am also milling, but I'm able to put my graveyard back into my library. So you get the idea, trying to mill my opponents, but how exactly am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that with this stack of cards right here. These are all clone effects. So Mirhall Mimic. This is a card that I really hadn't heard of much before I played Gyruda. Same thing with Phantom Steed. Same thing with Copy Crook and Naga Fleshcrafter and Stunt Double, Clone. I've heard of Clone before. Phyrexian Metamorph. Oh, that's a good card. Evil Twin, etc., etc., etc. This is a big stack of clone cards. And the whole idea is I cast Gyruda, I mill 4 cards, of course, and I try to get a clone effect to copy Gyruda. My clone effect will enter as a copy of Gyruda, and of course we'll have Gyruda's enter the battlefield effect to hopefully mill 4 more cards and get another clone, and another clone, and another clone, and another clone, and another clone. There are also some pretty interesting clone effects beyond just your classic ETB as a copy of another target creature. Phyrexian Metamorph has a lot of different lines. Just being a normal value piece to get an opponent's 1 ring is fantastic. Evil Twin is a sneaky little piece of removal, better than just cloning a Gyruda in some cases. Mirhall Mimic has a disturb cost, so if it's in the battlefield, you can disturb it. You may cast this card from your graveyard transformed for its disturb cost. Let's see what it transforms into. Enchant creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature. It's gonna be a Gyruda. Anyway, it's another one of those examples of a clone that does more than just clone. Flesh Duplicate. This is one of the few 2 mana copy spells. A lot of times this is great in early game to copy an opponent's Esper Sentinel or some kind of value piece like that. Same thing with Phantasmal Image. A few other creatures like Spark Double is a great creature to make a non-legendary Gyruda, and then I can start copying the Spark Double and get more non-legendary Gyrudas, which is great. Clever Impersonator, there's plenty of times where that just enters as a heuristic study because I know that I'm probably not going to end up getting my Gyruda loops, so getting a value piece is great. Another creature that I want to mention is Sakashima's Protege. It has Cascade, so there are times if I just hard cast it, that I cast a Sakashima's Protege, of course get it as a Gyruda, but then I get another clone that's off of that Cascade, and it's great, and get him another Gyruda. Another MVP is Auton Soldier. Never thought that I'd say that. But you can have Auton Soldier enter the battlefield as, of course, Gyruda. But it isn't legendary. It's an artifact in addition to its other types, and it has Myriad. Whenever it attacks for each opponent other than defending player, I may put a token that's a copy of this creature onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, each of which gets a Gyruda trigger. So Gyruda's galore. It's great. Now, with no assistance, there is a possibility to mill out my opponents, again, with no assistance, but I do have assistance in the form of cards like Panharmonicon, in the form of Roaming Throne. Both of those are ways that I can double my Gyruda triggers. So instead of just milling 4 cards, I'm milling 8 cards, and I'm putting, well, I have 2 instances of the Gyruda trigger on the stack. I am also milling my opponents out a lot, so cards like Mnemonic Betrayal are really, really good. This Tezzeret is a way that I can get my Panharmonicon or Roaming Throne, and I also had mentioned Thassa's Oracle. So how do I resolve a Thassa's Oracle? Well, if I'm milling everybody out, and let's just say an opponent somehow exiles my graveyard, including my Kozilek, or somehow gets Kozilek out of the game or exiled in some way, I can win with Thassa's Oracle. There are many different copy effects that allow me to have multiple Gyrudas, even though that Gyruda is a legendary creature. Cards like Sakashima, that's a great example. It just simply says the legendary rule doesn't exist. But the idea is that I have Gyruda, or I just have 3 creatures on the battlefield. That's pretty much the only prerequisite. And then I get a really handy dandy card. It's a reanimate card actually, called Dread Return. Many of us are familiar with this. It has flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures, because more likely than not, this is probably going to be in my graveyard. And I can cast it from my graveyard by paying its flashback cost, sacking those creatures, getting Thassa's Oracle onto the battlefield with, of course, an empty library, and winning the game on the spot. In this little pile of cards are a few other ways to get some value. So Deadeye Navigator, I can flicker Gyruda for just 2 mana. Essence Flux, I can get Gyruda onto the battlefield and flicker it with just 1 blue mana. Saw in Half, I can destroy Gyruda and get 2 more Gyrudas. Reanimate is great because a lot of times I'm casting Gyruda, getting a Gyruda trigger, and there are perhaps 2, 3, or even 4 clones in that pile of cards that I have just milled, so I can pay 1 black mana and get one of those clones back onto the battlefield, especially if I'm in a tight situation. Ghostly Flicker is a great way to flicker Gyruda and maybe a land to get some more value. Already talked about Dread Return. Displacer Kitten is great because whenever I cast a non-creature spell, I can exile up to 1 target non-land permanent, that being a Gyruda, then returning that card to the battlefield, getting, of course, another Gyruda ETB effect. Those flicker spells are also great because one of our biggest fears is casting Gyruda, and with Gyruda's ETB trigger on the stack, somebody removes Gyruda, exiles it, destroys it, or whatever, because then we still mill 4 cards and we could potentially get a clone onto the battlefield, but then it's not going to have a Gyruda as its target. So we run those flicker effects to potentially protect Gyruda. We also run the whole counterspell suite, an offer, Daze, Flare of Denial, Misdirection, Swan Song, Mana Drain. Mana Drain's great because it gives us some mana to be able to cast Gyruda. Force of Will, Flusterstorm, Hydroelectric Specimen is a great way to redirect some of those removal spells. Force Negation, Mental Misstep, get out of here, Swords to Plowshares. Commandeer, Fierce Guardianship, of course. Commandeer is great because we can gain control of some of our opponents' non-creature spell value engines. We do run some value engines. We run the classic Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, those two things. Lorien Revealed is great just to get an island or late game, draw 3 cards on a pinch. Other way to protect Gyruda is Spellskite. I've also been experimenting a little bit with Vexing Bauble. A lot of the faster decks like Rogside that I mentioned are kind of scary. Yes, Gyruda is a turbo deck, if you want to call it that, where I'm trying to get Gyruda out as fast as possible, but those high tier, tier 1 Rogside decks, those Magna decks, they're really fast, and if I'm on the play and have a Vexing Bauble in hand, throwing that onto the battlefield has got a lot of mental missteps out of my opponent's hands, a lot of counterspells out of their hands, and sometimes it just locks them out of the game for a little while. A couple other cards that I can get off of Gyruda's triggers, Tidespout Tyrant. There are a few instances where I can get infinite mana with a Tidespout Tyrant. Also, Hoarding Broodlord. Sometimes it just depends on the situation, but I can get a Reanimate with a Hoarding Broodlord. I'll talk a little bit more about the Tidespout Tyrant infinite mana little thing. So if I have, let's say, a Lotus Petal and a Sol Ring, and then of course Tidespout Tyrant on the battlefield. Let's just say Sol Ring is on the battlefield, and let's say I have an untapped land. I cast Lotus Petal, trigger Tidespout Tyrant to return Sol Ring. In response, I tap Sol Ring for 2 mana, return Sol Ring to my hand. I cast Sol Ring, bouncing Lotus Petal to my hand. I cast Lotus Petal, tap Sol Ring for some mana, bounce Sol Ring. And so you can see I have infinite colorless mana there. I also run Mox Opal. So Mox Opal taps for colored mana. So if I can turn Mox Opal online, I have infinite colored mana. I can infinitely blink and cast Gyruda with that infinite mana, because instead of blinking the Sol Ring, I'm starting to blink the Gyruda. And so that is a very niche win line, but it is in the deck. I had mentioned that I have all of that fast mana in the deck. Ramp spells, I also run the Dark Ritual, of course. Heartless Summonings is great because I don't care that my creatures get -1/-1. It allows Gyruda to be 2 colorless, less to cast. Culling the Weak is great, sacking a creature to add some mana. 4 mana is a significant amount. And then of course Cabal Ritual, just having, adding 3 mana for 2 is great, but also I have a pretty thick graveyard. So a lot of times that's adding 5 mana to my mana pool. This is the Gyruda deck. If you have any comments about it or any thoughts about how this Gyruda deck could be even better, I'd love to hear it. I 1000% acknowledge that there are probably better Dimir commanders, but that's not the point. The point is making Gyruda a cEDH deck, and just the best Gyruda commander deck possible. This may or may not be that, but either way, it's been a ton of fun to play. I hope you check it out. I will drop the link to the Mox field in the description below, so check that out as well. Again, drop a like, subscribe. Peace.